Hello, dear listeners. My name is Rose Goldthorpe, and I am the creator of this audio drama. I would like to welcome you to our second season of the Wessex Dramas with an adaptation of Thomas Hardy's romantic comedy, The Hand of Ethelberta. As with all romantic comedies, her hand is in hot demand, and her choice of who to give it to is also in hot debate, so loosen up your corsets, cozy up to the fire, and let us catch up with the drama.
There is the sound of instruments tuning up, with long A's being held in the next room. Lord Melchester ushers in Ethelberta and Picotee and sits them down on two chairs at the other side of a table which stands at one side of this corridor room. He remains standing nearby. The party is in smart day clothes.
You see, we have come in quite privately, and when the musicians enter, we can follow them out and huddle to our seats anonymously.
The door opens and around 8 musicians hurry through, going out of the other door towards the stage entrance. Christopher comes through last. He sees Ethelberta, gasps, halts, and sags, plopping his music down onto the table. He breathes loudly and is white-faced. Ethelberta stands up rapidly and shoots a piercing look of hatred at Lord Mountclair.
This is your pretty jealous scheme. I see it. Don't think I don't.
She hurries around the table, takes Christopher's hand and smilingly nods and murmurs encouragement at him, while he recovers, nods, and then smiles at her. Lord Mountclair and Ethelberta suddenly hear a gasping exclamation from Picotee, who then starts to swoon. Ethelberta drops Christopher's hand, leaves him, and hurries back around the table to catch Picotee as she faints. Ethelberta realises her opportunity and seizes it. She stabs a finger at each of Picotee and Christopher and addresses Lord Mountclair.
Now do you see it?
Oh, yes, of course, I do.
Christopher comes round to help Ethelberta, sitting Picotee back upright in her chair. Picotee is very embarrassed and won't look at anyone. She plays with her handkerchief, dabbing at her nose and sniffing. Christopher smiles at her and then at Ethelberta.
Are you feeling better now, Mr. Julian?
Yes, just a little stage nerves, I suppose. I'm glad to see you both, but I must go through now. Thank you. Good evening.
He hurries embarrassedly away. Ethelberta leans towards the hovering Lord Mountclair.
You're quite sure between whom the love lies then, now, eh?
I am. Oh, yes, beyond a doubt.
Ethelberta sweeps out of the room in high dudgeon, and Lord Mountclair follows totteringly. Ethelberta storms along, with Lord Mountclair occasionally catching up and then pausing to catch his breath and falling behind again. Picotee follows slowly in the distance.
Ethelberta, dearest, please forgive me.
You had no right to mistrust me.
He falls back again and then recovers his ground.
I do trust you, I do. You didn't blench. You should have told me that it was your sister and not you who was entangled with him.
Are you not ashamed?
I am. Sorry, my dear.
She pulls ahead again, dabbing her eyes. He catches up to her.
It was an inconsiderate trick of me. I own it. Now, do you...
She has pulled ahead again, and he stands wheezing and looking after her. Ethelbert has a quick look at the train times on the board outside of the railway station, sighs, and then returns along the road on the other side, meeting Picotee there. The two of them storm down the road, and then go into the Red Lion Hotel, and so Lord Mountclair totters into the White Hart opposite. Ethelberta, standing, seals a letter addressed to Lord Mountclair and gives it to the servant. Picotee is sitting by the fire, and she pours the tea. Ethelberta is just sipping her tea when the servant returns a letter from Lord Mountclair. She opens and reads it and rolls her eyes. She goes over to the other table, picks up the pen and writes again. She addresses it to Lord Mountclair. Ethelberta rings for the servant. The servant arrives and collects the letter. Picotee offers a cake to Ethelberta. Ethelberta sniffs, sits down, picks up her side plate and takes the proffered slice. She takes a big snapping bite and chews ruminatively, glowering.
I'm going for a stroll and a think around the cathedral, Pixie. You have a rest here.
Picotee sighs, stretches her feet to the fire and wiggles her toes. She has taken her boots off.
Oh, all right, Berta.
Ethelberta regards her food.
Actually, this cake's not bad. For a public house.
Ethelberta is strolling down the aisle when Lord Mountclair hurries up to her. He takes her hand and kisses it. He explains and apologises yet again. Ethelberta accepts his apology. Lord Mountclair urges that she marry him soon. Ethelberta agrees, whereupon he takes her hand, kisses it, and then kisses her on the cheek delightedly. She gives a small smile and nods her head. Picotee is struggling to put a bag in the overhead container, and Ethelberta is rearranging her hat and hair.
Pixie, I ought to tell you that I am getting married early. Not that I can believe the fact. It's to be the day after tomorrow.
Pixie plumps down on a nearby seat.
Gosh, so soon. I can't make you, you know.
She moves over and sits next to Ethelberta and takes her hand, looking concernedly at her.
I agreed to the day. It's to be a secret wedding, so we need no preparations.
Is this on account of his family?
No, ours, dear. I suspect that Papa would try to stop me, if he heard. I suspect that he has, prejudices. Now, dress again as my sister tomorrow, Pixie, as Lord Mountclair is dropping by early to conclude some bits of paperwork.
Gosh, my sister marrying a lord.
Gosh is vulgar, dear. And yes, I'm thinking that with Lord Mountclair being a little more mature than most suitors, I won't be expected to have 10 children and then spend my life ill in bed like poor mother.
Yes. But I think I wouldn't mind, though, having 20 children if it was with Chris. You will still visit abroad and entertain at home, won't you?
I don't really know, dear. But I will certainly now have time to get on with my writing. I'm already planning a grand play cycle and will be able to use his vast library.
Picotee puts Ethelberta's hand down and sits back in her seat.
Oh, yes. Writing.
Ethelberta looks out of the window and remembers her last meeting in the church with Lord Mountclair.
Marry me on Friday, and, as you desire, I solemnly promise all that money and influence can do to bring about the union of your sister and her desired love.
Ethelberta nods, and he raises her hand to his lips.
On that condition, I am yours, irrevocably.
Mr. Chickerell is sitting reading the newspaper when there is a commotion at the door, with a raised young woman's voice and a man speaking bullyingly to her. The butler puts down the paper and looks up. The door bursts open, and a well-dressed, late middle-aged man strides in. He stops and stares.
You Chickerell?
I have that honour, sir. May I ask whom you are and why you are here?
Name's Bertie Mountclair, brother of the Marquis.
Lord Mountclair?
Yes, and my blasted brother is going to marry your daughter. Are you in on it, sir?
I beg your pardon, Mr. Mountclair. I know nothing of this.
Mountclair starts to pace furiously.
Then you don't approve, eh?
Approve? I would rather she be a scullery maid. I would rather she scrub the floors.
Then will you come with me and persuade the girl otherwise?
Chickerell grabs his coat and umbrella and races out of the door.
Try and stop me. I just need to drop in at Exonbury Crescent and collect a few clothes. Have you a carriage?
It's outside. Hurry!
They thunder down the corridor. Chickerell comes out of the front door, with Joey boggling out of the carriage and then closing the door behind his father. As the butler starts down the steps, a hansom cab draws up at a quick trot, and Sol and Dan jump out. They address their father as he is still on the steps.
Father, I'll to be running away with that Marquis fella.
No, Sol. Pixie said as how he were a-marrying her.
Oh, yeah, so we reckoned as how the aristocracy would be marrying in London, like, and that you might be able to stop it, Father.
Chickerell resumes hurrying down the steps and mounting into the carriage.
We might need some reinforcements. If your brother's brought along some footmen who tried to interfere, my sons are here.
Oh, bring them along. Bring them along, damn it.
He bangs the roof.
Ride on. Ride on.
The boys mount, and the carriage horses canter away. Christopher is slogging along the road to Enkworth Court when he hears a carriage approaching. He stands in the road and waves it down. The carriage stops, and Christopher goes to the door with the open window.
Excuse me, sir, but do you know... Mr. Chickerell, what are you... Are you going to Enkworth Court as well?
Yes, we are indeed.
So you've heard then?
Bertie leans forward and calls.
Yes, the whole ruddy world has heard, and...
I'm a good friend of Mrs. Petherwin's. Could I possibly come along?
What do you think this is? We're in a hurry.
Please.
Oh, for goodness sake, get in then. Get in.
Christopher scrambles in and squeezes uncomfortably between the two brothers. Bertie raps on the roof again and roars.
Ride on and quick, man, quick.
Coach canters off. The men stream up the front steps, and Bertie rings the bell. The butler tells them that Lord Mountclair has left for the church. The men all pour back into the carriage and canter off again. The men pour into the church and look around. It is empty, but there are traces of confetti on the floor. The men stream into the vestry, where the priest is just finishing disrobing. They demand to hear about the marriage, and he shows them the new entries of Ethelberta and the Marquis in his marriage celebrations register. They all stand up again and look at one another in dismay. Julian enters haggardly at the door, and Faith jumps up to greet him with a kiss on his cheek. She is waving a letter around.
You'll never guess. Aunt Lucy has left us a few £100 in her will. Hundreds!
Christopher looks up.
A few £100? Well, in that case, we're going to live in Italy for a few years, to get away from all this.
Oh, Italy! Rome?
Wherever you want.
He sits down heavily in the armchair.
Oh, sorry. Did Mrs. Petherwin marry?
Yes.
He bites his nails and stares into the fire.
Well then, that's that. Tea? And you can tell me about Italy. Don't bite your nails, Chrissy.
She playfully taps his hand, picks up the kettle, and goes to fill it. Christopher sighs. Christopher, looking tanned and a little bohemian, approaches the house, when he has suddenly to stand back for a quickly driven carriage which swiftly emerges, turns in the opposite direction to where he stands, and bowls off down the road. Christopher recognises the shoulders, hair, and bonnet of Ethelberta. Her driver stands postilion in the rear. She is driving. Christopher smiles to himself, slowly shakes his head, and enters the drive. Mr. and Mrs. Chickerell are seated by the lit fire, and Picotee is sitting near to them, together with a 9-year-old girl seated on a stool. Mrs. Chickerell has a blanket over her knee. Joey ushers Christopher in, and Chickerell gets up and wrings Christopher's hand.
Come in, sir, come in.
Picotee is pleased, but very embarrassed, and doesn't know where to look, especially after Christopher smiles at her.
How kind of you to accept our invitation.
Yes, kind.
Chickerell ushers Christopher to a seat, and Picotee pours and hands him some tea and cake, the latter of which he deposits on a nearby elbow table while drinking his tea.
As soon as your Faith wrote Picotee you were coming back, and to Melchester, I said we've got to have them for tea.
Oh, for tea, yes.
I'm very sorry Faith couldn't come, sir, but she has had to visit a friend who is very ill.
Oh, we're happy to see either of you. You've just missed Ethelberta, you know.
Yes, I just saw her driving away, with the carriage boy merely looking on.
Oh, she's allus been an independent body, allus.
She completely runs the Marquis's estate now. The books, the orders, who rents which farms.
Good grief. Well, she always was a good organiser too.
And she's published a cycle of plays to great acclaim. They're going to put them on in the West End of London.
Whatever next? How is the Marquis with all of this?
He don't be saying much at all, Mr. Julian. He's much in the gardens these days, and she don't let him drink and such. He be very happy to leave things in her hands. Picotee, take those secateurs and pick me some roses for the table there, pet. Perhaps Mr. Julian would help you.
Both Picotee and Julian shoot nervously to their feet.
Yes, of course. Certainly.
Picotee blushes and picks up the secateurs from the table. They both go out through the French windows. Picotee wanders down to the bottom of the garden, followed by Christopher. She shyly bows her head and starts cutting roses and putting them into her trug, which is on the bird bath.
I'm sorry you missed Berta.
I'm not.
She looks up, startled.
Why?
Christopher takes her hand, removing the secateurs to the trug.
I came to see you.
Me?
Yes, you, Picotee. At long last I've realised what a blithering idiot I've been, letting a little flower bloom unseen whilst chasing visions of strangling vine flowers in the jungle.
Is the strangling vine Ethelberta?
I suppose so.
They both laugh, and then Picotee turns her head away in confusion.
Picotee, I realised that I was waiting to hear the next instalment of your letters to Faith in Italy, not because I wanted to hear of Ethelberta, but because I wanted to hear of you. I missed you.
Picotee's head is still turned away.
Me?
My missing you made me realise that I love you, Picotee, and that you are the sweet lady that I want.
Picotee turns her head and looks up at him. Christopher takes her other hand now as well and kisses them both.
Will you have me as your husband, Picotee? Will you marry me and make me the happiest man alive?
Yes. Yes. Oh, yes.
He kisses her. Mr. and Mrs. Chickerell look out of the French windows, see them, and smile at one another.
That was an episode of The Hand of Ethelberta. We would like to thank our miraculous editor, David Harris, and our dashing composer, James Cox. And of course, we would like to thank our entrancing cast. Matthew Libbury, Alex Davenport, Carl Wharton, David Mellor, Marion Chase, Mike Keane, James Makepeace, Glenn Hanna, Lucy Kennedy, Stephanie Stephan, Catherine McCooligan, Stephen Dean, Jenny Dyer, Caroline Joy, Thomas Purchas Rathbone, Jenny Bowden, Victoria Knowles, Mac Maguire, and Nathan Walker. And last but not least, thank you to you too, dear listeners, without whom this would not be possible.